My name is Julia, and my family just demanded I give up my bedroom because my brother's wife is pregnant. Never mind that I pay the taxes, fix the leaky pipes, and legally own the house they all live in. But what they don't know is, I'm done playing the obedient daughter, and I'm about to teach them what ownership really means. Before we begin, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Now, let me tell you how my morning coffee turned into a betrayal I'll never forget. The kitchen smelled like sunshine and hazelnut roast. I had just poured my first cup of coffee, that quiet moment where the world softens when Greg walked in. My older brother, tall, loud, and always just a little too eager to deliver bad news. "Julia," he said, without even a hello, "Maya's pregnant. We'll need your room. Mom and Dad agree, it's time you grow up." I stared at him over my coffee mug, the steam curling up between us. He looked too smug for someone who just announced that his wife was moving into my room. I didn't answer right away, because I needed the silence to swallow the white-hot rage threatening to rise. "My room," I finally said. "You mean the one I've lived in for 6 years, the one I painted, decorated, and pay the electric bill for?" He chuckled, and shrugged. "You're almost 30, Jules. It's not like you're a kid anymore. You can sleep in the basement for a while." The basement. The damp, unfinished concrete room we used for storage and laundry, where spiders had their own zip code. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, I heard slippers shuffling in. Mom, then Dad behind her. "Julia," my mother said gently, in that tone she reserved for when she knew she was being unfair but pretended otherwise. "Greg and Maya need space for the baby. It's just practical." I set my cup down too hard. Coffee sloshed onto the table. "And I don't need space. What am I, a guest in my own house?" "You're being selfish," Dad added, barely looking at me. He was already opening the fridge, like this was just another Tuesday. Selfish. The word landed like a slap, as if I hadn't given up weekends fixing the water heater or paid the last 3 property tax bills because they forgot. As if I hadn't let Greg crash here rent-free after losing yet another job. "I can't believe you're doing this," I whispered. Greg folded his arms. "We're doing what's best for the family. You've had your time in that room." The walls felt like they were closing in. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too loud, too bright. I glanced at the fridge, the mortgage documents still clipped there with my name on them. This wasn't just inconsiderate. This was betrayal. I stood, shoving the chair back. "If you think I'm giving up that room without a fight," I said, voice trembling, "you don't know me at all." Mom's eyes narrowed. "We didn't raise you to act like this, Julia." "No," I said, grabbing my keys, my hands shaking. "You raised me to give everything and expect nothing, but maybe it's time that changed." And with that, I walked out the front door, not defeated, not yet, but burning. Because the one thing they'd all forgotten, that house belongs to me. They just don't know it yet. By the time I returned home that evening, the sun had dipped low behind the trees, casting long amber shadows across the hardwood floor. The house felt unusually quiet, like it knew a storm had passed but another one was just beginning. I walked straight to my room, hoping to hold onto whatever thread of normalcy remained. My sanctuary. My space. My room still smelled like lilac and cedar, the candles I always lit after a long day, but it felt different now. Like someone had exhaled in it without permission. I dropped my bag on the chair, kicked off my shoes, and was about to lie down when a soft knock came at the door. Not a real knock, more like a guilty tap. Then she appeared, Maya, my brother's wife. The woman who, just this morning, watched in silence as her husband declared war on my space. She held something in her hands, folded denim, still damp and blotchy. "Hey," she said, stepping halfway into my room like she belonged. "I just wanted to bring these back." I looked down. My jeans, my best pair, designer, fitted like a dream. The kind of jeans that cost too much but made me feel like I owned the sidewalk when I wore them. "I thought I'd be helpful and do laundry," Maya added with a sheepish smile. "But I think I messed them up. I accidentally washed them with towels. Oops." Oops, like she'd stepped on a leaf. Like she hadn't just ruined a piece of clothing I'd saved 3 paychecks for. I took the jeans from her. They were splotchy, misshapen, the kind of mistake that didn't just happen unless you didn't care. "They were dry clean only," I said flatly. "Oh," Her eyes widened too much, too dramatic. I didn't see the tag, I just thought I'd be nice and help with your laundry. You're always so busy. Busy fixing this house. Busy working 2 jobs to keep the roof above all of our heads. Busy being treated like a doormat in my own home. I folded the jeans slowly, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Next time, I said, keeping my tone neutral, just ask. These weren't cheap. Maya shrugged, leaning against the doorframe like we were old college roommates and not 2 women on the verge of a silent war. It's just clothes, Julia. I looked up then, met her eyes. No, I said softly. It's my clothes in my room that I still live in. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes flickered. Greg just wants what's best for the baby. You get that, right? I mean, a nursery is important. So is respect. But I didn't say that. Instead, I forced a smile. Totally. Just next time ask before you help, especially when it's something that doesn't belong to you. A pause settled between us. Long enough for her to know the conversation was over, short enough to sting. She didn't apologize, just nodded and left, humming to herself like she hadn't just left a grenade on my floor. When the door clicked shut, I sat down hard on the edge of my bed, Marley, my cat, leaping onto my lap in solidarity. I ran my fingers through his fur, the only soul in this house who didn't expect me to give more than I had. I looked at the ruined jeans again, a symbol now, not of laundry gone wrong, but of territory crossed, of false sweetness and subtle sabotage, because Maya hadn't come to help. She came to test the water, to see how far she could wade into my life before I pushed back. Well, she got her answer. I sat back against the pillows, eyes on the ceiling, my thoughts whispering one thing. This wasn't just about a room anymore. It was about power, and I was about to reclaim every inch of mine. The next morning, I wasn't looking for a fight. I only wanted coffee and silence. But when I stepped into the dining room, barefoot and still half asleep, I froze. Maya was already there, at the head of the table, sipping coffee from my favorite mug, the one I bought in Asheville with the hand-painted bluebirds, and typing on my laptop. My laptop. I opened my mouth to say something, but the universe got there first. A small pop echoed, followed by a faint hiss. Sparks flickered from beneath the keyboard like fireflies at dusk. Then the unmistakable scent of burnt plastic curled through the air. My body went cold. What did you just? I rushed forward, heart lurching. Maya jumped up, wide-eyed, knocking over the mug in the process. The rest of the coffee spilled across the table in a brown wave, soaking papers, a magazine, and the side of my now-smoking laptop. Oh my God, she said, but not like someone who was horrified, more like someone who had just dropped a spoon on the floor. I didn't see the cord, it was sticking out weird. I stared at the ruined machine. That laptop held everything. My work files, tax records, the client portfolio I'd been building for 3 years, the novel I'd been secretly working on. Gone, all of it, because she didn't see the cord. Maya waved her hand like she was swatting away an annoying fly. Relax, Jules, it's just a computer, you can get another one. I felt something crack, not loudly, not in a way anyone else could hear, but I heard it, like the sound of a seam tearing in the dark. That was my work, I said, voice low, trembling. That was my life. You don't just use people's things without asking, and you definitely don't dismiss it when you destroy them. Oh, come on, she said, rolling her eyes. You act like I did it on purpose. Did you? I shot back. Because this is starting to feel like a pattern. Greg walked in then, yawning, scratching his head. What's going on? Your wife just destroyed my laptop, I said without looking at him. And she thinks I'm overreacting. It was an accident, Maya insisted. God, Julia, I said I was sorry. No, I snapped. You didn't. Greg frowned. Babe, maybe we should have asked before using it. Are you seriously taking her side right now? I turned to him, eyes wide. Again. Whoa, calm down, he said, palms up. It's just a laptop, don't make it into a thing. It is a thing, I shouted now. You took my room, she ruined my clothes, and now my laptop, and every single time I say something, I'm told I'm dramatic or selfish. My father's voice came from the kitchen doorway. What's all this noise about? Before I could answer, Maya stepped forward, all sugar and innocence. I accidentally spilled some coffee, Robert, she said sweetly. I was trying to check something on Julia's computer for the baby registry and the cord was loose. It sparked, but it's fine. I think she's just upset. Dad rubbed his forehead. Julia, can't you just let it go? It was an accident. There it was again, that subtle slap. Let it go. Like my boundaries were inconveniences, like everything I'd worked for didn't matter. I stood there, staring at their faces. My brother looking exasperated, my father already bored, Maya still feigning concern like she hadn't just fried my digital life. Something inside me went quiet, still, not numb but clear. I'm done, I said quietly. Greg raised an eyebrow. With what? I looked at each of them. With all of this, the fake apologies, the gaslighting. The way you all act like I don't matter unless I'm being useful. Dad shook his head. You're being sensitive again. No, I said, voice calm now. I'm being aware. Big difference. Maya turned back to the coffee pot, already moving on like nothing happened. Greg picked up the laptop and winced. Yeah, this thing's toast. I picked it up from him carefully and held it to my chest. Then, without a word, I turned and walked upstairs, past the hallway photos, the peeling wallpaper, the family portraits that didn't tell the full story. When I reached my room, I closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and exhaled. One by one, they were stripping away everything of mine in this house. But they forgot something important. I still had power. And they were about to learn what happens when you corner someone who quietly owns everything they take for granted. It was early evening when I came back from my walk, an aimless 3-mile loop through the quiet, tree-lined streets of our Charlotte neighborhood. I'd needed space, air, a world where nobody spilled coffee on my life and called it an accident. I remember pausing at the edge of the driveway, taking one last breath before facing what I thought would be another round of cold silence and polite hostility. I wasn't prepared for this. The front door was cracked open. Inside, I could hear music playing faintly, some breezy acoustic track Maya always liked. I stepped in. Something felt off. The hallway was too empty, too clean. I took a few steps toward the staircase and froze. My favorite lamp, the one with the stained glass shade, was sitting on the floor next to a cardboard box. My bookends, my throw blanket, a pair of shoes tossed carelessly like yard sale leftovers. Confused, I climbed the stairs to my room. Correction, what used to be my room. The door was wide open. Inside, I found Greg stretched out on the bed, my bed, arms behind his head like he was posing for a mattress ad. He looked up when he saw me and grinned. Hey, sis, like the new setup. The room was completely rearranged. My artwork was gone. The dresser had been moved. Maya's pink yoga mat sat rolled up in the corner. A framed sonogram rested on the nightstand that used to hold my incense and old journals. I didn't speak. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I didn't trust myself to say it without screaming. Greg sat up, swinging his legs over the side casually. We figured you'd see it eventually, thought it'd be easier this way. No drama. No drama, I whispered. Yeah, he said, running a hand through his hair. It's just better for everyone if we get the nursery started now. You're barely here anyway. I live here, I snapped. You used to live here, Maya said, appearing in the doorway like a ghost in designer leggings. We figured it's time to transition. I turned to her. You dumped all my things in boxes like I'm some tenant being evicted. Her smile was tight, too tight. You are still in the house. We didn't kick you out. She leaned against the doorframe like she owned it. But if we're being honest, she added, it'd probably be better if you moved out altogether. Babies need calm environments. And this, she gestured vaguely at me, this isn't really working. It took everything in me not to break. Greg sighed. Look, Jules, don't take it personal. We need space. You need to grow up. It's a win-win. I stared at them both, my heart pounding, and all I could think was, they actually think they're doing me a favor. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste blood. Then I turned and walked, down the stairs, past the hallway where my childhood photos still hung, past the living room where Dad once helped me with math homework, past the coat closet with the cracked mirror I'd meant to fix, down to the basement, where sure enough all my belongings were dumped like forgotten luggage at a train station. My pillows, my boxes, my candles, clothes, books, even Marley's scratching post. The air was cold, damp, smelled faintly of mildew and old laundry detergent. I stood there in the middle of it all, numb. It was a quiet humiliation, not loud or cinematic, just Ordinary, cruel in how normal they made it seem. I sat down on one of the boxes, Marley circling my ankles like he knew. And then, like someone lighting a match in a dark room, I remembered something. The deed. The property deed I'd filed away years ago, tucked in a folder in a box marked tax stuff down here in the basement. I moved slowly, methodically, opening boxes one by one, Marley meowing curiously as I sifted through old papers, manila envelopes, crinkled receipts. And there it was. The manila folder, the house deed. My name, only mine. I had bought this house 4 years ago after my divorce quietly through a family friend who was a realtor. My parents had helped me with the down payment, but they never put their names on the title, not even as co-signers. They had just forgotten, or assumed they'd always be in control. But I'd made sure, because somewhere deep down, even back then, I knew I'd need proof one day. I stared at the paper, at the embossed county seal, the notary signature, the finality of it. They thought they'd banished me to the basement. They didn't realize they'd just handed me the high ground. I smiled. Not a happy smile, not even a vengeful one, just the kind of smile you wear when you've finally seen things clearly. They wanted me out. But they had no idea what I still held in my hands. The light bulb in the basement flickered like it was as fed up as I was. I sat on a creaky mattress, the kind people leave on sidewalks with a free sign, wrapped in a hoodie that still smelled like lilac and hope. Marley curled beside me, his soft breaths the only sound in the room. Above us, muffled laughter floated down through the floorboards. I could hear clinking glasses. Someone turned up the music. Maya's voice bubbled up like champagne, high, sugary, and hollow. They were celebrating. That was the part I couldn't get over. They weren't even pretending to be conflicted about what they'd done. My parents, Greg, Maya, they'd moved me like an inconvenient chair in a crowded room and then toasted themselves for the space they'd made. The basement smelled like damp drywall and the metal tang of old pipes. One corner had a leaky faucet that dripped in perfect rhythm, like a clock marking each moment I didn't say something. Each minute I chose silence over fire. I hadn't cried yet. Not really. But the stillness was starting to unravel me. Marley nuzzled my elbow, his head tilting in that intuitive, knowing way cats seem to possess when you're one thread away from breaking. "I'm okay," I whispered, mostly to convince myself. The basement door creaked open, and I sat up straight, startled. Footsteps descended, slow, deliberate. My father, he looked tired, not guilty, not even particularly present, just worn, like the last 20 years had been too much and too little at the same time. He carried a dinner plate in one hand. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, setting it down on a cardboard box like I was an invalid in hospice. The plate had meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and a single broccoli floret, like someone had measured out the bare minimum of care. "Thanks," I said, though my throat tightened around the word. He didn't sit, didn't ask how I was, just stood there like a visitor delivering bad news and trying to leave before it got sticky. "They're just trying to figure things out," he said after a pause. "Give them time. Give them time." The phrase made me want to scream. Time for what? To take more? To repaint my room with nursery pastels and let Maya keep burning through my life one apology at a time. I looked up at him. "Did you know I own this house?" I asked. His eyebrows twitched, not surprise, more like warning bells. He looked at the walls, the pipes, anywhere but my face. "Your mom handled all that with you, didn't she?" "No," I said. "She didn't, but I kept the paperwork. I read it." He shifted on his feet. Silence stretched between us like rope pulled tight. "I'm not asking for a fight," I said quietly. "But I need you to hear me. You didn't just move your daughter into a basement. You moved the homeowner down here." His jaw flexed. "That's not how we see it." I picked up the cold fork and tapped it lightly against the plate. "I know," I whispered. "That's the problem." He looked older then, or maybe just more tired. He gave a tight nod, turned, and climbed the stairs without another word. The door closed behind him, and then clicked, locked. I stared at it, stunned. It wasn't subtle, it was a message. They wanted me contained, to keep the peace, to keep things quiet. To keep me down. I stood slowly, my fork still in hand, heart pounding. The plate was still warm from his touch, but the food was cold, like everything else they handed me lately. I placed it back on the box and whispered, "Never again." Because this wasn't just about a room anymore, or a laptop, or a pair of ruined jeans. This was about respect, and they had none left to give. But I did, for myself. It took me 3 seconds to realize the door was locked. One click. That's all it took to change the energy in the room from frustrating to terrifying. I stood beneath the stairs, staring at the seam of light under the door, the only proof that the world still existed on the other side. My hand hovered over the doorknob. I twisted it once more. Nothing. I knocked, then louder, then pounded. "Hello," I called up. "Dad," no answer. The music upstairs was still playing. I checked my phone, 2% battery. No signal, of course. The Wi-Fi barely reached the basement, and I'd forgotten to bring down my charger. Not that there was an outlet nearby. This wasn't a room meant for living. It was a room meant for storage. And now apparently me. I took a step back and stared at the door like it might blink or breathe or admit what it had just done. I wasn't locked in because of some accident. I was locked in because someone made a choice. They clicked the lock, walked away, and left me in the dark. The air felt thinner somehow. The kind of silence that rings in your ears. I sat on the mattress again. Marley jumped into my lap, purring nervously. "It's okay," I told him, petting the top of his head with shaking fingers. "They'll unlock it soon. It's probably just a mistake." But I didn't believe it. And when you stop believing your family wouldn't do something cruel to you, something cracks. The light bulb above me buzzed louder, like it was trying to warn me. I lay back and stared at the ceiling. Time passed like molasses. No footsteps, no voices, no one checking in. Hours, I slept in fragments, waking up every 20 minutes, heart racing. Dreams like traps, looping memories of my childhood in this house. Birthday parties, fireworks, backyard movie nights. And then flashes of now, Maya's smirk, my ruined laptop, my things in boxes. At some point, I stopped waiting for the door to open. I just accepted it. This was the new normal, and that terrified me more than the lock. I must have dozed off again because when I next heard the creak of footsteps, it felt like they were underwater. Distant, fuzzy. Then the sound of a key turning. I sat up. The door opened. My father stood there holding a flashlight like some benevolent rescuer. "Dinner's ready," I blinked. "You locked the door." He didn't flinch. "You were sleeping. We didn't want to disturb you." "You locked the door," I repeated, voice sharper now. "You didn't even check if I was okay." Shrugged like I was making too much of it. "We thought you needed rest." Rest, not fresh air, not a choice, not dignity, rest. "Is that what Maya thought too?" I asked, rising to my feet. "Did she suggest it, or was that all you?" He didn't answer. I walked past him. And as I passed, I caught a whiff of the dinner they were all enjoying, roast chicken, garlic bread, something cheesy. Laughter trailed in from the dining room like the end of a joke I was never meant to hear. Maya looked up when I entered. "Oh good, you're up," she said, with a smile that was all teeth and no soul. "I told Greg you probably needed a break. You've been so tense lately." I stared at her, tense. They locked me in a basement. Like I was an unwell relative or a liability they had to manage, like I was someone to be tolerated, not heard. Greg stood, motioning to a seat at the table. "Come eat. Let's not make this weird." It was already weird. But I didn't say that. I simply turned and walked back to the stairs. Not back down, but up. To the attic, where the spare keys were hidden. Where I kept a fireproof box of documents no one remembered existed. Where my patience had finally expired. Because I knew what I had to do now. This wasn't just a family misunderstanding. This was a quiet erasure. And I was done being erased. The attic was warm with late summer air trapped under the eaves. Dust clung to every box, every forgotten Christmas wreath and high school yearbook shoved aside like old truths no one wanted to deal with. I found what I was looking for in the fireproof box tucked behind the ductwork, the real estate deed. My name, printed clean and unmistakable. Not Julia and just Julia. It still felt surreal, holding proof of something no one else in this house seemed to believe. That this home, the roof over our heads, the walls they redecorated without asking, the floor they locked me beneath was mine. Not theirs, mine. I held the document to my chest for a moment, letting that truth sink into my bones. Then I heard it, soft voices just beneath the attic vent. I crouched low and crept toward the air grate near the floor. The one that overlooked the hallway just outside my old bedroom, Greg and Maya's room now. They didn't know I was above them. Maya's voice floated up first. Once she's out, we'll talk to your parents about transferring the house. It's not like Julia's doing anything with it. Greg laughed under his breath. Yeah, they already think it's theirs. All we have to do is let that idea settle. Then we bring up the paperwork. I froze. Maya continued. She doesn't even act like an owner. She's just floating around, always working or sulking in corners. No backbone. She's always been like that, Greg muttered. Doesn't fight unless someone takes her parking spot or burns her quinoa. They both laughed. My pulse thundered in my ears. You really think we can get the house in our name? Maya asked. Easily, Greg replied. Mom and Dad will believe whatever we tell them. Once the baby's born, we'll guilt them into it, and Julia's too passive to fight back. I stopped breathing. The casual confidence in his voice, like they'd already won, made my skin prickle. It wasn't just about a room. It wasn't just about a laptop or a pair of jeans or being locked in the basement. They were plotting to erase me completely. My family thought they were gently nudging me out. But Maya and Greg were already imagining a future where I no longer existed inside these walls. Not even as a memory. Something in me shifted. Something final. I stood up slowly, silently, the deed still clutched in my hand. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I didn't storm down the stairs or rip open the door. Instead, I smiled. A slow, cold smile. The kind that forms when the game changes, and you know your opponent still thinks you're playing checkers while you're moving rooks and bishops. They thought I was weak because I didn't shout, because I gave them chances, because I tried to be fair. But what they didn't understand is that some of us don't raise our voices, we just build the case. I slipped the deed back into its folder and tucked it under my arm. Then I walked quietly down the attic stairs, past the vent that still hummed with their whispered plans. I didn't need to tell them I'd heard. Not yet. I wanted to watch them smile at me, lie to my face, offer cold plates and warm apologies. I wanted to see how far they'd go, how deep the betrayal would stretch before I snapped the truth like a trapdoor beneath their feet. Because when I moved out, it wasn't going to be in shame. It was going to be in power. And I wasn't leaving alone. They were. I picked the cafe on purpose. Neutral territory with good pastries, and a view of the street that made me feel like the world was still full of normal people doing normal things. Not daughters being pushed out of their own homes. Not siblings plotting behind closed doors. I sat by the window sipping peppermint tea, watching the rain beat against the glass. Marley was home, curled in his bed near the space heater I'd lugged down to the basement. He'd watched me leave this morning with his usual silent knowing. He always knew when I wasn't just going for errands. Across from me sat Erica Caldwell, local realtor, mid-30s, smart eyes, and the kind of smile that didn't push too hard. She'd helped me buy the house 4 years ago and hadn't asked why I'd called her out of the blue yesterday. Now she flipped through the deed and property documents I'd handed over, nodding quietly. Everything's still in your name, she said, tapping the top page with a manicured finger. No cosigners, no complications. They can't legally touch this place. I nodded, swallowing the lump of validation in my throat. But, she added, her voice dipping, there is something unexpected. That word, unexpected, I'd heard it too often lately. What do you mean? She turned the folder toward me and pointed at a small section buried in legal text I hadn't revisited since the original purchase. There's a lien on the property. I stared at her. A what? A lien, she repeated. Filed about 18 months ago. For a small loan, $8,300 secured against the property. It's not huge, but it complicates things if you're planning to sell. I blinked. I never took out a loan. Erica's brow furrowed. It's in your name, but... She leaned in. It's weird. The payment routing traces back to your parents' joint account. I felt the world tilt just slightly. You're saying they borrowed money, I whispered, against my house without telling me? She nodded. Looks that way. The tea turned sour in my mouth. I set the cup down before I dropped it. They hadn't just disrespected me. They hadn't just minimized, excluded, or manipulated me. They had quietly used my home as collateral, without a word, without permission, without shame. They probably assumed you wouldn't notice, Erica added gently. It's not uncommon in families. You trust someone to handle paperwork, they slip something through. I handled my own paperwork, I said, almost to myself. No one else had access. Except once. I remembered the flu I had the year after I bought the place. When Mom helped by collecting my mail while I was bedridden, I'd been so out of it, so tired, I hadn't tracked every envelope. Some letters never made it back to my desk. She must have intercepted the documents. They must have forged something, used my signature, or duplicated it. I felt sick. "I can help you clear the lien," Erica said. "It'll cost you, but it's manageable. You'll need to make a few calls, maybe talk to a lawyer. I have someone I can refer you to." I nodded again, numbly. My fingers curled around the edge of the table until my nails bit into the wood. "I'm not selling right away," I said slowly. Erica raised an eyebrow. "But I am preparing to," I clarified. "And I want that lien gone before I make any moves." "Smart," she said, packing the papers back up. "Once it's cleared, we can list whenever you're ready, or if you prefer, you could rent it out." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because the storm inside me had quieted in a new, unfamiliar way. I wasn't angry, not even heartbroken. I was focused. Because now it wasn't just about reclaiming my space. It was about reclaiming my rights. They'd hidden the truth under layers of fake smiles and family dinners, but I had just pulled one more lie into the light, and I wasn't done yet. The boxes were still half unpacked. Cardboard flaps left open like questions I wasn't ready to answer. A few books lined the shelf. My toothbrush leaned awkwardly in a chipped mug by the sink. Marley's food bowl sat empty on the tile, though I'd filled it just that morning. It was my first night alone in the apartment. Truly alone. No laughter above my head. No footsteps down the hall. No passive-aggressive politeness wrapped in family obligation. Just me and the silence. I sat on the floor beside the window, knees pulled to my chest, wearing a hoodie I hadn't washed since the basement. The air smelled like fresh paint and old betrayal. Outside, the city whispered. Distant sirens. Someone's car alarm chirped. Wind pushed at the trees like it knew something I didn't. Marley curled next to me, purring softly. And then, finally, after everything, I cried. Not the single tear down the cheek kind of cry. Not cinematic or composed. The real kind. The kind that takes your breath and dignity at the same time. The kind that starts with silence and ends in a shaking chest and clenched fists. I buried my face in my arms and let it happen, because I needed it to. Because somewhere between being called selfish and watching my belongings dumped in boxes, I'd forgotten I was allowed to grieve. They were supposed to protect me. That's the thought that echoed loudest through the sobs. Not the lie about the lien. Not the ruined laptop. Not even the locked basement door. It was the simple truth that gutted me. They were supposed to protect me. That's what family is, right? The people who stand between you and the storm, not the ones who throw you into it. My father, who used to check my closet for monsters, now clicked a lock behind me without blinking. My mother, who taught me to stand up for myself, now flinched every time I did. Greg, who used to build blanket forts with me when we were kids, now strategized how to erase me from the very house I saved. And Maya, I didn't cry for Maya because I'd never trusted her to begin with. But my family, they should have known better, should have seen me, should have said, "Wait, this isn't fair, Julia deserves more." But no one said it, so I did. In the quiet of that apartment, my voice raw and shaking, I whispered it to no one. I deserved better. Marley nudged his head under my palm. I scratched behind his ears, my hands still trembling. "I'm not crazy," I said to him, to myself, to the blank walls. And just like that, the tears stopped. Not because the pain was gone, but because the grief had emptied itself like a storm finally spent. What was left wasn't broken. It was clear. The only people who had protected me through this truly, consistently, were me and the little ball of fur beside me. And maybe Erica with her steady voice and her direct answers. But mostly just me. That had to count for something. I stood up slowly, knees aching from the hard floor, and walked to the kitchen. Made tea, lavender and mint, something soft, something kind. I sat back by the window, the cup warming my hands, and watched the headlights move like ghosts across the building across the street. I didn't have everything figured out, but I had enough. Enough clarity, enough proof, enough strength. They didn't break me. They just showed me who they really were. And in doing so, they reminded me of who I am. Not the burden, not the afterthought, not the quiet one in the basement. The owner, the decision maker. The one who still holds the deed, literally and emotionally. They pushed me out of a house, but I'd finally found my home. 3 days later, a moving truck pulled up in front of the house I used to call home. Correction, the house I owned. It was just after 10 a.m. The air was crisp, unusually sharp for Charlotte this time of year, like the universe had exhaled just enough chill to keep people honest. I stepped out of my car in black jeans, boots, and a tan trench coat. My sunglasses hid what I needed them to: calm, focus, and the memory of every insult I'd swallowed in silence. The movers were fast, efficient. I'd hired them through a service Erica recommended, no-nonsense professionals who didn't ask questions when I handed them a printed list titled, "Items to remove from premises immediately." Furniture, appliances, the wall clock above the kitchen doorway, the mirror in the front hall, everything that belonged to me, which was everything. I watched from the sidewalk, arms crossed, as the front door swung open. Maya stood there, hair in a messy bun, holding a coffee cup with a heart-shaped handle. Her robe hung half open, and behind her I saw boxes, my boxes still stacked from when they tossed me into the basement. "What the hell is going on?" she called, stepping barefoot onto the porch. I kept walking. Didn't pause, didn't smile, didn't explain. Just handed the clipboard to the lead mover and pointed at the living room sofa. "That goes next." Maya followed me, her voice rising like a tea kettle. "Julia, are you seriously moving out your own family's furniture?" I turned slowly, removing my sunglasses. "No," I said evenly. "I'm moving my furniture out of my house." She blinked. "What? This was never your house," I said, voice cool and clear. "You've been playing pretend, but today the pretending ends." Greg burst through the door seconds later, pulling on a sweatshirt. "Jules, what are you doing? You can't just waltz in here and—" "Stop," I said, holding up a hand. He stopped, because something in my tone, maybe the absence of rage, maybe the presence of certainty, told him I wasn't here to argue. I turned to the movers. "Take the dining table next, and the chairs." "You're overreacting," Maya snapped. "This is unbelievable. We're trying to start a family, and you're gutting the house like a lunatic." "No," I said. "I'm setting boundaries, the kind you didn't bother to respect." Greg stepped forward. "You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted. "And I have the paperwork to prove it." I reached into my bag and pulled out a clear binder. Inside was a pristine copy of the deed, my name, only mine. Their expressions changed instantly. Greg's jaw slackened. Maya's cup trembled in her hand. "You plan to steal what you never owned," I said softly. "You plotted, whispered, maneuvered. You even locked me in a basement, but you forgot something important: ownership is power." Maya looked around wildly, as if someone might pop out from behind a bush and explain this was all a mistake. She backed up onto the porch. "This isn't happening. This is crazy." "Right, Greg?" Greg didn't answer, because he couldn't. He just stood there, staring at the truth in my hands, the truth they thought I'd never find, the truth they assumed I was too soft to use. I turned back to the movers. "Load the kitchenware. Be careful with the ceramic set, top shelf, right cabinet." One by one, pieces of the life they thought they'd inherited disappeared into cardboard and padded blankets. And I didn't stop them, because I didn't owe them comfort anymore, only closure. Greg didn't follow me at first. He stood rooted to the porch like the wind might blow this whole scene away if he just waited long enough. But I wasn't wind. I was the storm they invited and underestimated. I handed the movers the last inventory page and stepped back onto the front lawn. The house behind me looked different now, like it had already started shifting ownership in spirit, not just law. Greg finally moved, jogging after me, clutching a hoodie over his chest like armor. "Wait," he said, breathless. "Wait, Jules, what are you doing? You're not actually selling it, are you?" I turned to face him fully. He looked pale, smaller than I remembered. I held out the paper. He didn't take it, so I read it to him. Property title: Deed number 473,812. Owner, Julia Annette West. Effective since July 2nd, 2021. No co-owners, no secondary claimants. He blinked like the words stung more than the wind now picking up around us. You can't just—" "I can," I said, "and I am." The screen door creaked open. Maya stepped out, barefoot again, her face tight with panic and confusion. "What is she talking about?" she asked Greg. "She's bluffing, right?" Greg didn't answer, because he knew, maybe not when they started scheming, maybe not when Maya whispered about convincing the parents or fixing the paperwork. But now he knew everything had collapsed. I extended the deed a little further. You were going to convince Mom and Dad to transfer something that was never theirs to give. Maya stepped down slowly, the robe now clutched at her chest like fabric could cover bad intentions. Tell me it's not true, she whispered to Greg, voice cracking. Still, he said nothing. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't expected to feel again. Pity, but I didn't let it soften me, because pity doesn't rebuild what betrayal breaks. From the doorway, my parents appeared. My mother's eyes were wide. My father's jaw was clenched like stone. They had heard everything. I didn't wait for them to speak. I held up the second envelope in my hand, smaller manila. I bought a small bungalow, I said flatly. It's modest, near downtown. 2 bedrooms, you'll like the backyard. I tossed the envelope toward the porch. It landed at my father's feet with a slap. The keys are inside and the lease agreement, paid in full for the first year. They didn't move. I didn't wait. Greg stepped forward. Jules, you don't get to call me that anymore. His mouth opened, then closed again. Behind me, the moving truck engine revved. It was time. Without looking back, I walked to my car, Marley already curled in his carrier in the back seat. I opened the driver's door, took one last breath, and got in. As I pulled away, I didn't feel triumph. I felt freedom. And that was enough. Asheville's early morning light crept through my bedroom window like a soft hello, muted and golden just the way I liked it. The walls were no longer white. I'd painted them a warm terracotta 2 weekends ago, the kind of color that made even silence feel like home. The couch was thrifted. The bookshelf was half full. My plants lined the windowsill like green soldiers guarding peace. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation for how I lived. I padded barefoot across the hardwood, Marley winding around my legs, tail high, purring as if the last chapter of our life had already faded into distant memory. The kettle whistled softly. Tea. Always tea. I poured a mug, wrapped my fingers around the warmth, and settled into the armchair by the window. Outside, the world moved without me needing to keep it in line. And that was the point. No locked doors, no footsteps overhead, no laughter that left me out, just stillness, just breath. I still thought about them sometimes, Greg, Maya, even my parents. I wondered what it felt like to live in that bungalow, if the yard was enough, if they ever looked at the front door and thought of me, not out of guilt, but out of recognition. Did they ever admit to themselves that I had drawn a line and then had the nerve to hold it? Sometimes I caught myself hovering over their names in my phone, not to call, just to wonder. But then I'd look around and remember, I had nothing left to give that didn't cost me, and I wasn't interested in bleeding for people who never asked why I was hurting in the first place. The messages came, of course. A few texts. A missed call from my mother every couple of weeks. A vague, hope you're okay from Greg the night after the movers came. But none of them asked to understand. They asked to forget. And that I couldn't give them, so I put the phone on silent. I picked up a book. I took a deep breath. And I kept building a life where respect didn't need to be begged for. My job, once a blur between interruptions and obligations, had started to bloom again. My writing had texture, voice, confidence. I'd started drafting pieces that were less about deadlines and more about truth. Because once you reclaim your voice, it gets loud, even in silence. I wasn't angry anymore. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. And peace doesn't announce itself, it just arrives, softly, fully, without needing permission, just like I had. A year can change everything. It doesn't erase pain or smooth out every scar, but it teaches you how to carry them without letting them own you. And that's what I've learned. Survival is one thing, but living, really living, requires boundaries, requires voice, requires choosing yourself every single time, no matter how uncomfortable that makes others. Asheville had become home in the truest sense. Not because of the warm walls or the quiet nights or the steady rhythm of Marley's purring from the windowsill, but because nothing here asked me to shrink. This morning, the air was cool and sweet, thick with the smell of early fall leaves. I walked past the bookstore on the corner like I always do on Sundays, coffee in hand, jacket zipped to the chin. But this time, something stopped me. There it was. In the front display window, nestled between titles on resilience and memoirs of healing, Home is Boundaries, Reclaiming Your Space and Self, by Julia A. West. I blinked. Not because it surprised me, it was my release week after all, but because seeing it out in the world made something loosen in my chest that I didn't realize was still clenched. I stepped closer. The cover was simple, clean lines, soft colors. The silhouette of a woman unlocking her front door, not just entering, but claiming. The store manager, a sweet woman named Dahlia who always remembered my name and Marley's brand of kibble, waved at me through the glass. I smiled back. And for a moment, I just stood there, watching people walk past the window, some pausing, some picking up the book, thumbing through pages they didn't know were pieces of my life, pieces of my truth. None of them would guess that the author, me, once sat alone in a dark basement, shaking, locked away by people who claimed to love her. They'd never guessed that the quiet strength between those pages was forged in silence, in betrayal, in 1,000 tiny humiliations no one else thought twice about. And that's what made it beautiful, because healing isn't about being seen by the people who hurt you. It's about being seen by yourself clearly, wholly, and without apology. And sometimes, if you're lucky, by the world. A young woman stepped up beside me and picked up the book. She read the back, eyebrows lifting slowly. Then she clutched it to her chest and walked inside. I smiled to myself and took another sip of coffee. That's why I wrote it, not to prove anything to them, but to offer something to women like me, women who had their rooms taken, their voices dismissed, their boundaries broken under the guise of love and duty. Women who were told to be grateful. Women who stayed silent until they didn't, until they moved out with nothing but a cat, a deed, and a sense that they deserved more. Now I walk with that woman every day. She lives in me, and she's never going back. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself from scratch, or walk away just to find who you are again? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if Julia's journey moved you, share this video. You never know who might need to hear that reclaiming your space starts within. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.